I was about to go out the door, and this big parcel arrived through, and I ripped it open and said, BBC, 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 written all over it, and I thought... So I opened it up, and it said, it's series, Only Fools and Horses would like you to have a look at the part of Rodney. And I was late at this point, and I thought, well, I'll come back tonight, and I'll read them then. And I went out and met my friends, had a few beers, whatever we were going to do. Came back to the flat and had a look at these scripts. And I hadn't read, there was a PS on this note saying, can you come tomorrow morning and read? Sorry, it's a bit of a rush, but we've got to do it very, very quickly. So I thought, I've got to read these now if I'm going to go to this interview. And so I just started reading page 1, episode 1, about midnight, 12:30, something like that. And I was reading them until about 4:30, laughing out loud, and thought, I can't wait to do this. I must get this audition, because I thought it was just a regular audition, and I was going to turn up in the casting offices, and there'd be 8 other people going for the job. I didn't realise it was my job. And so I met Ray Butt, who's a little guy like this, and he said, can you read them? And I read them. He went, all right, thanks. And that was it. Off I went. And thought, oh, well, blown that then. It's a shame. And they called me back a couple of weeks later and said, can you come and read with some other people? Which I did. Didn't read with David at that point. Read with Leonard. And then eventually they said, okay, we'd like you to read with this chap called David Jason. And it was only when the 3 of us read together that the people on the other side of the desk went, wow, this is good. This is good stuff. And that's when I realised that I'd had the job all along. But there was something quite magical, that moment that David and Leonard and I first read in that tiny little office, Ray Butt's office. Because there are 3 different generations of actor with 3 very different styles of acting, and it all just gelled straight away. And John and Ray went, yep, we'll go with this. This is what we'll do. And off we went. We all went off to the bar and thought, so have we got the job or what? Is that it? I'm Nick, by the way. You're Leonard. Oh, David, hello. And the rest is history, really. I think we were very conscious when we first started rehearsals that we mustn't be seen to be antagonistic towards each other. I mean, on the page it would have been quite easy to read it as if Del doesn't like Rodney, Rodney doesn't like Del, and they don't like Grandad, and, you know, there's these 3 old farts living in a council house, and it could be quite oppressive. But there was such love in the script, really. I mean, you could see that Del loved Rodney and would do anything for him, and vice versa, and they all loved the Grandad, and there was a great family bond. And it was apparent very early on that Del had taken Rodney under his wing, and he should probably have gone into care after the mother had died, the father had gone. Grandad wasn't going to be any help, so it was down to Del to look after Rodney. And they loved each other. I think that's probably what we decided was the most important thing. Yes, of course, they take the mickey out of each other all the time, and they're telling each other to shut up, you soppy old goat, and all this sort of stuff. But there is a central love, which we thought was the most important thing to portray. There's always been a battle of wits between Del and Rodney. They are perpetually scoring points off each other in the pub, chatting up girls, or anything like that. They're always firing at each other the whole time. And I don't know, I suppose maybe that's what brothers do. Maybe that's what families do. But yes, Rodney is capable of being a bit of a schemer. And in various episodes he's tried to break away from Del to do something, and Del has either helped him cock it up or he's bailed him out of it if it's gone wrong. But yeah, Rodney has been desperate to stand on his own 2 feet for years. And I think it was only when he met Cassandra that he actually realised that it was time to start breaking away from Del. John Sullivan isn't afraid to write about anything. There are no subjects that he won't touch upon. In various episodes, we've had, miscarriages, people dying, real life stuff that happens, but not necessarily you expect to see it in a situation comedy. And he's very clever the way he can just lead an audience up the garden path until you're convinced that you know what's going to happen and you're ready for the big laugh, and then something tragic will happen, or vice versa. Something tragic has happened and you're watching something very, very sad, and then all of a sudden you're laughing your head off. He's just so clever the way he can interweave all the emotions. It's a roller coaster ride reading a John Sullivan script, because you never know what's going to happen next. You know it's going to be hysterically funny, but you're pretty certain there's going to be some very touching moments in there. I mean, Leonard had some marvellous speeches in the early, I suppose, first 3 series, where we were talking about war and all this sort of thing. It was amazing, really amazing man. When Leonard died, we'd already started filming with Leonard. We were a couple of weeks into filming, and we heard he had a heart attack. And we continued filming as best we could without Leonard. There were various scenes that David and I had to do, and we were hoping that he would make a full recovery, as he was. And then we'd all get together, and maybe he'd be on a slightly lighter schedule, obviously be on a lighter schedule, but we could still get the show done. And then a few days later, David and I were in the makeup wagon, getting made up. It's very early one morning, and Ray just came into the doorway and looked at us both and shook his head and left. And so we went back to our caravans, and David and I were pretty convinced that was it. We certainly didn't feel funny anymore. But the series had been commissioned, and we were halfway through it. So we had about 5 days off, I think, with frantic phone calls going on between everyone. And the first reaction was, we'll just replace Grandad. We'll get another character of Grandad in. John was dead set against that, as David and I were. So the idea of having another relative come in, that was probably the best idea. But John, being such a genius, decided to introduce him at Grandad's funeral. And that was incredibly difficult to shoot, because I think we did it somewhere just outside Hammersmith, and it was freezing cold and the snow was falling. And David and I are just staring into this grave. And we'd done it for real the week before. So that was a very, very difficult thing to try and get our head around. And we were all very sad, because all the crew knew Leonard, and he was a much loved man. And then to actually film his funeral was a very, very hard thing to do. And then right at the very end of it, we throw Grandad's hat into the grave. And I'm in floods of tears. And David and everyone was. And then the vicar turns around and says, "Has anyone seen my hat?" And the audience just go, "Woof!" So that's the kind of genius we're talking about with John Sullivan. He can just turn the saddest of occasions into a belting laugh. And vice versa, he can do it the other way around too. He can turn a belting laugh into something immensely sad. Basically, as long as the Trotter family stay together, they will all be fine. There is a tremendous bond between them. There's a great love between them. With Del, with Rodney, with Grandad, with Uncle Albert, with Cassandra, with Tessa's character, Raquel. There is a tremendous love. They all love each other. I'm not saying it's all lovey-dovey stuff, because they all argue, but then all families argue. But I think it would have been very boring if you'd have had all of us just scoring points and shouting at each other the whole time. I don't think the audience would have enjoyed watching that one bit. So that there had to be an affection, a genuine affection, which fortunately we all felt anyway. So that wasn't hard to act. But yeah, it would have been dull just to watch three grown men fighting each other the whole time. I think that's another reason why John has been so clever and the series has been so successful, is because it has grown with the times. It has mentioned Thatcherism, buying your own council place. Everything that's been happening socially in this country in the last 20 years, at some stage or another, has been mentioned in an episode of Fools and Horses, I think. And it would be very boring for the nation to tune in at Christmas time and think, here we go again. Here's the three guys sitting around, going out to flog a bit of this, then coming back and arguing. I mean, that's not a successful TV show. That's how it started out, and it grew from there. And it really took off. I mean, when we started it, Series 1, I think, was watched by myself, David, and my Auntie Peggy in Chessington, and that was it. No one else saw it. We were getting less than half of the normal viewers that contemporary shows were getting at the same time. You know, we'd go out on I can't remember what day it was, so midweek, a good slot, you know, but all of a sudden it was only 6-7 million people, and then the comedy show that was on the next day was getting 18. And we thought, well, we're funnier, aren't we? What are we missing here? Why isn't anyone watching us? And that carried on throughout Series 1. Through most of Series 2, I think we only gained a couple of million, which isn't very much, considering there were no other channels. There were no, I think video recorders had only just come in, but there was certainly nothing like Sky or BSB and all the various cable channels, which do now make a dent in the ratings. But then it was BBC One, BBC Two and ITV, and that was it. And I think it was only when the repeats of Series 2 went out that it started this gradual climb. People were obviously going, oh, I quite like that. I've seen this one before. I quite like it, so I'll watch it. And then it just, whoosh, took off for 2 or 3 years after that. There was an episode where I had to play with Boycie and Marlene's dog called Duke. It was a big Great Dane, and I think it was an episode called not the Prussians are coming, from Prussia with Love. It was about a pregnant German girl, anyway. And in the course of this episode, I had to go out and play with their big dog in the garden, and then I'm supposed to come running in and say something and get on with the scene. Anyway, the dog turned up, and typical animal trainer speak. He said, oh, no, it's all right, I'll do anything you want. Do anything you want. This was work to my command. I said, well, what we'd ideally like it to do is to put both paws on Nick's shoulders, and then Nick will just fall over backwards, and that's it. Okay, fine. Come on then, dog. Can't remember what the real dog's name was, or the dog's real name was. So he said, come on then, Duke, put your hands on that. Nothing. This dog is just... Come on, up you go. Take 2. Come on, up you go. The trainer's going, come on, up you go. This dog said, nothing. So I said, well, look, why don't I just try and wind it up a bit over the coffee break, because we were due a 10-minute coffee break. It doesn't know me. It's not fair, really. So if I play with it for 10 minutes and, you know, we get to know each other, maybe I can make it do it rather than the trainer do it. Okay, fine. So I spent my coffee break throwing sticks and balls for this dog, and it was gradually getting more and more excited about the whole idea. 20 minutes went past, and I'm saying, come on, see if you can do it. And it did it. Bang. But the camera wasn't turning. I said, it did it. So we started again. Turned over, action. I'm like, come on then, dog. Up you come, like this. And this dog went, woof, bang. Knocked me down like this. The camera pulls out. And you can see it in the episode that the dog is treading all over me. But it's very carefully edited, because what you don't see is that the dog got rather too excited and actually had me. That bit's cut out. You could just see the dog sort of manoeuvring into position, and it's got its paws on my shoulder blades. And what you don't see is the next few seconds. And the crew were really, really helpful. Really helpful. They fell about. They were on their knees. Well, weren't we all? But he still writes, the dog. Just occasionally, Christmas cards, things like that. There was an episode called To Hull and Back, where John had written a sequence where we get lost in the North Sea, and we actually go to a gas rig and ask directions. So we all piled aboard this tub of a steamer called the Inga. I mean, it looked very good, but it was seaworthy, but it's, it wasn't the Oriana. And so we all chugged out from Hull to go out to this oil rig, gas rig. But it was about a 7-hour trip. So what they decided to do was chopper out one crew to go out to the gas rig so as it could take shots from the oil rig, gas rig, looking down at the boat, coming towards it. And whilst we were chugging out for 7 hours and chugging back for 7 hours, we could film all the stuff that we had to do on board the boat. We thought it'd be a good time-saving device, save having to go out all the time and reschedule different days. Okay, fine. So 30 or so of us went out on the boat, chugging away. And I'm okay on the water, and Ray's okay on the water, and David's okay on the water. But it was one of those seas, I don't know if you've ever been on one, it wasn't choppy by any means, and it was quite hot, and it was quite still. But there was a very large swell running on this sea, and it was a slight cross beam. So the ship was pitching, and it was rolling as well. So out of the 25 to 30 people that started out on this voyage, by the time we got to the rig, most of them have gone bright green and are being sick. I mean, there are people parking custards over the side like you would not believe. Wardrobe, gone completely, all of them are gone. Sparks, gone. Gaffers, gone. Buster, salty old sea dog, bless his heart, he's parking custards over the back and had been for the last 4 hours. So, of course, we get to this oil rig and the crew are up there waiting to say, all right, where is everyone? Can you see Buster? Where's the camera? And it turned out that Makeup was doing the clapperboard and pulling focus because the camera assistant, he was at the back with Buster and Wardrobe and Sparks and Gaffers. It was awful. And then, of course, we did our bit. We all pulled ourselves together, and, of course, all the crew that were sick had to go down below so as the camera couldn't see them. Well, you know what's going to happen. You go below on a diesel engine boat. Do you feel seasick anyway? Every so often, somebody would just interrupt the shot by coming up and going, "Ugh!" So we'd have to go round again. Say, do you feel better now? Okay, now get back down in that bloody hole and wait till we finish filming before you're sick again. And then we had a 7-hour trip back. It was a long, long day. A long day. The Reliant Robin, it was an absolutely perfect car for the trotters to drive around in, but that's the kindest way of putting this. It's not the most forgiving car to drive. To the point if you corner it too fast it'll go over, because it's only got one wheel at the front. And we decided, or John decided, it'd be nice if we could get smoke and things coming out of it and backfires and all this sort of stuff, which we actually controlled on a little panel between the two seats. We had one for smoke and one for the backfire. There were little explosives that would go off that special effects boys had rigged up. And the first time we tried it went okay, but the cameras were saying, we can't really see the smoke. So if you can give it a bit more smoke. And I think what they did, we'd hit a switch and that would pump Red X, I think it's called, into the engine, which would generate more smoke out of the back. Okay, fine. So we're pumping all this stuff in there, and they said, okay, action, and we were thundering along, and David said, all right, I'll hit the backfire button now. Bang, and that went off nicely. Okay, hit the smoke. Bang. And there was a cloud of smoke coming out of the back. We couldn't see anything. But what we hadn't realised was that the Reliant Robin probably wasn't the most airtight car in the world. So this plume of smoke just came out from between our legs, and we were driving blind for the last 50 yards of this shot and choking our hearts up. We got the shot done eventually, but there was another episode where they said, right, we're going to fly this car over a bridge. I think it was an episode called Dates, where Rodney has a car chase in this thing. And they said, do you want to do it? And I said, no, I'm not driving that thing anything beyond 35 miles an hour, thank you very much. It was bad enough driving it over the Humber Bridge between all these bloody great juggernauts. No way am I going to fly it. So they got a stuntman down, and he took one look at it and took one look at the location and said, okay, I want full body armour for this. I want the lot. I want neck braces, back braces, leg braces, the lot. And they said, well, you haven't got to fly it very far. He said, yeah, but I've never flown one of these things before. I don't know what's going to happen. He said, my money is on the engine coming out when I hit. He said, because it'll come down on the front wheel, that'll push the engine out. It's a fiberglass car, so if the engine's coming out, it's going to hit me. So we all think, it's got a bit serious now, hasn't it? But he knew his stuff, and he landed it very well, and the engine didn't come out. I think we broke the roof rack or anything, but there's no way I was going to fly that car. Not a chance. A typical filming day would start with us. If we were filming in the winter, we'd get to the location pre-dawn, so we would rehearse the stuff we'd learnt before, the night before the sun came up, so the cameras could have a look at it all. And then as the sun was coming up, David and I would go and get dressed and made up and everything. Cameras would rig up, lights would rig up, and then we'd start. And we'd make it, the dawn would be up or whatever, and we'd wait a few more minutes until the sun finally rose, and then we'd start work, because we only had until about 3 o'clock in the afternoon before we lost the light again, certainly in December, which we certainly filmed right up until the last few days, sometimes before it was due to go out. So David and I would get to work, having learnt scenes 2, 3, 4 and 5, to be met with somebody saying, have you learnt scenes 2, 3, 4 and 5? We go, yeah, learnt them last night. Okay, well, could you just have a quick look at scenes 4, 9, 11 and 17? It's just that we think it would probably be better to do it in this location rather than waste daylight time going over there, so we're going to do those here. We will do those tomorrow or the next day. So I used to tease David, and my apologies to Clint Eastwood in Dirty Harry, because we'd just sit in our caravans surrounded by pieces of script, some of which we'd learned and some of which we hadn't learned, but we were supposed to, in the next 30 minutes, learn the day's dialogue. And I looked at him one day and he was just staring blankly at these pages, not knowing which ones to look at, and I just said to him, I know what you're thinking. Do we learn scene 5 or scene 6? Well, in all the excitement, I've kind of forgotten myself, but you've got to remember you're looking at the pages of Only Fools and Horses, the most powerful sitcom in the world. Laugh your head clean off. And what you got to ask yourself is, do I feel funny today? Well, do you, Dave? Because it got absolutely frantic. We did not know from one minute to the next, sometimes, what we were supposed to learn at all. And people would say, you coming down to the bar for a drink after work? We go, we'll come down and get drunk with you guys, and then we'll just turn up for work and go, oh, sorry, did you want us to learn that? No, sorry, no, we went for a drink instead. So basically, our days revolved around getting out to work in the dark, getting cold, learning whatever we could, and then going back to our hotel rooms, getting soup and sarnies from room service, and learning the next day's job. It's the glamour, it's just glamour. There was one story when we were filming in Miami, which nearly got me into trouble. Incidentally, it was lovely for David and I to go to Miami because we weren't known there, so we could go into bars, and for the first time in 18, 20 years or so, we could sit down at a bar and have a beer together, and no one would take any notice. Of course, there was the occasional British tourist, but more often than not, the locals would just say, oh, you're Brits, hi, welcome to Florida, and that would be it. So that was nice. But we were filming in, it was Coral Gables, and there's a huge hotel there called the Biltmore Hotel, which has a great big tower. And David was filming there. They were doing some split-screen stuff, because if you remember on that episode, he was playing two characters. He was playing Dell, and he was playing the mafia boss, Don Occhetti. And I thought, well, I've got a day off. I've got 2 or 3 days off in Florida. What shall I do? So I phoned up my, not my local, but the airfield closest to where we were staying, and asked whether I could get a checkout ride done and maybe hire an aircraft, because I fly airplanes. And they said, yeah, sure, come on down and we'll give you a checkout ride and all this sort of stuff. And obviously, because I'd never flown in America before, I had a safety pilot with me. And we did all the briefings and all that sort of stuff. And we did the stuff that's required of a pilot to make sure he's safe to fly. And he said, okay, well, it's all yours now. You just have a fly around, and where do you want to go? And in the distance, I could see the Biltmore Tower, and I said, "Is it all right if we just head on over there? Because I know there's some friends of mine working over there, and it's about their lunch break now. So can we just go and buzz the building?" And he went, "Yeah, sure, you do whatever you want. Go for it." And so I went over there, and I could see the tower, and I thought, "Oh, I wonder if there's anyone out on the balcony," because I knew they were filming right inside this tower. And so I dipped a wing and went not too close, never too close. And as I came round for another zoom, I could see 2 or 3 people waving. So I thought, "Oh, they're on lunch break. Okay, fine. Well, I'll go a bit closer. I'll go around again, bit lower, bit tighter, round the thing. Oh, look, there's a few more people coming out now. Oh, look at them all waving. Oh, aren't they friendly?" So I'm dipping wings and blipping the engine and generally showing off. And then I went round for the 3rd time, and I realised they weren't waving at all. They were going. And they had just that second got to the most complicated part of the split screen, which is complicated to do at the best of times. And they just got to the bit where David meets himself in this bit, which takes hours to do anyway. And they had just about finished it when this spotty Herbert came along in his aircraft going, all right, mate. And not only buzzed them once, I didn't screw it up once, I screwed it up 3 times for them. Sorry, chaps.